I still remember the exact sentence my older brother said while the movers carried my mother's furniture out of the house. "You don't belong here anymore, Claire." He didn't yell. He didn't slam a door. He just smiled the way people do when they think they've already won. The county probate attorney sitting across the dining room looked uncomfortable. He cleared his throat, shuffled a stack of papers, and quietly asked, "Mr. Bennett, are you sure you want to say that with everyone present?" My brother shrugged. "Why wouldn't I?" That was the moment I knew something was terribly wrong, because our mother's funeral had ended less than 3 hours earlier. The flowers were still fresh. The casseroles neighbors had dropped off were still warm. And somehow, before she was even buried, my brother had already changed the locks. My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 52 years old. For 26 years, I worked as a public school counselor in Columbus, Ohio. I spent my career helping children understand that families are supposed to make you feel safe. Funny how life teaches lessons no textbook ever can. If someone had told me 6 months earlier that my own brother would try to erase me from our mother's life before the funeral flowers wilted, I'd have laughed. Then I would have apologized for laughing, because I honestly believed people couldn't become that cruel. I was wrong. Very wrong. The strange part wasn't that my brother wanted the house. It was how confident he looked. Not nervous, not guilty, confident. Like someone who already knew the ending of the story while everyone else was still reading the first chapter. That confidence stayed with me all afternoon. It stayed with me while neighbors hugged me, while church friends offered condolences, while distant cousins whispered that grief changes people. No, grief hadn't changed Daniel. Money had. Our mother, Eleanor Bennett, had been the strongest woman I ever knew. She raised 2 children alone after our father died from a construction accident when I was 16. She worked double shifts at Riverside Hospital. She packed school lunches at 5 every morning. She never missed a birthday, never missed a recital, never missed a football game. She wasn't wealthy, she wasn't famous, but everyone in our neighborhood knew Mrs. Bennett as the woman who always showed up when someone needed help. Daniel liked telling people he inherited Mom's determination. The truth? He inherited her smile. Nothing else. By 48, he'd already started 3 businesses that all failed. Borrowed money from relatives, promised to pay everyone back, never did. Every Thanksgiving there was another excuse. The economy, my business partner, the timing. Eventually, people stopped asking. Except Mom. She never stopped believing he'd figure things out. I'd drive her to doctor's appointments every other Wednesday after work. Without fail, she'd ask the same question. "Have you heard from your brother?" I'd smile. "Last week. Is he okay?" As okay as Daniel ever is. She'd nod, staring out the passenger window. "You know, underneath all that pride, he's still my little boy." I'd never argue. There was no point. A mother's hope doesn't disappear because everyone else can see reality. Last winter, Mom's health changed fast. Congestive heart failure, then kidney problems, then pneumonia. I moved into her guest room without even thinking about it. Daniel lived 40 minutes away. He visited twice. Both visits lasted less than an hour. The first time, he complained about hospital parking. The second time, he spent 20 minutes asking Mom where she kept important paperwork. I noticed. Mom noticed, too. After he left, she looked exhausted. Not physically, emotionally. She reached for my hand. "Claire?" "Yeah?" "If anything happens—" I squeezed her fingers. "Nothing's happening today." She smiled. "You always interrupt the hard conversations." "Occupational hazard." She laughed softly. "No, it's because you're protecting me." She closed her eyes for a moment. "When I'm gone," I hated hearing those words. Promise me something. Anything. Don't let guilt make your decisions. I frowned. What does that mean? She opened her eyes. It'll make sense later. Those became the last complete sentence she ever spoke to me. 3 days later, she slipped into unconsciousness. She never woke up. The funeral passed in a blur of handshakes, casseroles, hymns, and memories. People kept telling me she was proud of me, that she'd talked about me constantly, that I was such a devoted daughter. Daniel soaked up every compliment like it belonged to him, too. He stood beside me receiving sympathy from people who had barely seen him in years. Then, before most guests had even reached their cars, he disappeared. I found out why when I drove back to Mom's house to collect her medications. The locksmith's fans sat in the driveway. New deadbolt, new keypad, new mailbox lock. The man installing them looked confused when I walked toward the porch. "Ma'am? I live here." He looked down at his work order. "My work order says ownership transferred this morning." My stomach tightened. "Transferred?" He pointed toward Daniel. My brother stood on the porch talking into his phone. When he saw me, he ended the call immediately. "What are you doing?" "Taking care of things." "The funeral just ended." "Exactly." He jingled a new set of keys. "I'm preventing problems before they start." "What problems?" "You." The word hit harder than I expected. I stared at him. He looked completely serious. "I've already spoken with the attorney," he continued. "Mom wanted everything handled efficiently." "Then why are you changing locks?" "Because this house belongs to me now." I laughed, not because it was funny, because it sounded impossible. Daniel folded his arms. "You always underestimate me." "I don't underestimate you." "No?" He smiled. "Then tomorrow's meeting is going to be very educational." Before I could answer, the locksmith quietly packed his tools and walked away faster than anyone carrying a toolbox should be able to walk. He knew. Everyone standing there knew, except me. That night, I barely slept. Something felt wrong. Not sad, not confusing. Wrong. Mom was organized to the point of obsession. Bills filed by month, insurance papers color-coded, tax returns stored in labeled binders. She planned everything. There was simply no world where she secretly handed everything to Daniel without ever mentioning it. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. It was a voicemail. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Something made me press play. A man's voice, calm, professional. "Ms. Bennett, this is Thomas Mercer from Mercer and Hill Estate Planning." He paused. "I believe your brother may have misunderstood your mother's instructions." My heart started pounding. "If you receive this tonight, please attend tomorrow's meeting before signing anything." Another pause. "And whatever you do," he dropped his voice lower, "don't let Daniel leave early." I listened 3 more times. At 7:45 the next morning, I parked outside Mercer at Hill. The building looked older than I expected. Red brick, white columns, quiet. The receptionist smiled politely. "Mrs. Bennett?" "Claire." "They're waiting." As she led me down the hallway, I noticed Daniel already sitting inside the conference room. Expensive suit, fresh haircut, coffee in hand. Relaxed. Far too relaxed. He looked up and smirked. "There she is." Like he'd been expecting me all along. I took the chair across from him without saying a word. Attorney Thomas Mercer entered carrying 3 thick folders. He looked from Daniel to me, then quietly reached behind him and locked the conference room door. My brother's smile faded. For the first time in 2 days, he looked uncertain. Thomas Mercer waited until the lock clicked before placing 3 thick folders on the conference table. The room went quiet. Even the air conditioner seemed louder. Daniel leaned back in his chair and forced a laugh. Seriously? Locking doors now? Mr. Mercer didn't answer right away. He adjusted his glasses, opened the first folder, and looked directly at my brother. "Mr. Bennett," he said calmly, "before we begin, I'd like to ask one very simple question." Daniel shrugged. "Shoot." "Did your mother personally hand you the document you brought to my office yesterday?" "Of course she did." "When?" "The week before she died." Mr. Mercer nodded once. "I see." Then he opened another folder. "The problem with that answer," he slid a medical chart across the table, "is that your mother had already been admitted to intensive cardiac care 3 days before the date written on your document." Daniel's smile flickered. "Maybe you're reading the wrong file." "I wish I were." Mercer looked at me. "Claire, your mother left detailed instructions." He reached into the largest folder and removed a sealed envelope. My name appeared across the front in Mom's unmistakable handwriting. My hands started trembling. I hadn't seen that handwriting since she signed a birthday card 6 months earlier. Mercer pushed it toward me. "Your mother instructed that only you could open this." Daniel immediately leaned forward. "Hold on." Mercer ignored him. I carefully broke the seal. Inside was a handwritten letter. The first sentence made my vision blur. "Sweetheart, if you're reading this, it means your brother tried to rush the estate." I stopped breathing. Mom knew. She had known. Mercer quietly waited while I continued reading. She wrote about the months before her illness, about Daniel asking strange questions, about requesting copies of financial records, about insisting she simplify everything. Then came the sentence that changed everything. I discovered someone tried accessing my safe deposit box without permission. I looked up. Daniel had gone completely still. Mercer slowly opened the second folder. There were 2 attempts. He laid photographs across the table, bank security logs, timestamps, surveillance stills. One picture showed Daniel standing inside the bank lobby. Date: 8 months earlier. He looked like someone waiting for an appointment. Mercer tapped the photo. "The bank refused access because your mother hadn't authorized anyone." So? He slid another document beside it. Someone came back 2 weeks later carrying forged authorization papers. Silence. My brother's jaw tightened. "You're accusing me of forgery?" "No." Mercer folded his hands. "I'm saying the Secret Service document examiner already did." The room froze. Even I stared at him. "The what?" "The United States Secret Service examines financial document fraud." He opened another report. "The signature authorizing access to your mother's safe deposit box," he looked directly at Daniel, "wasn't hers." Daniel laughed too loudly. "This is ridiculous." "It gets worse." Mercer reached into the final folder. "This is why your mother instructed me not to release the estate immediately." He placed a flash drive on the table. "What is that?" I asked. "Security footage." Daniel suddenly stood up. "I'm done." He reached for the door. Locked. Mercer calmly pressed a button beneath the table. The receptionist stepped inside. "So did they arrive?" Mercer nodded once. Perfect timing. 2 detectives walked into the conference room. Not uniforms, plain clothes, badges clipped to their belts. Daniel turned pale. "What the hell is this?" One detective introduced himself. "Daniel Bennett?" What? We'd like to ask you a few questions regarding attempted financial fraud and document forgery. Daniel looked around the room like someone searching for an exit that no longer existed. You can't do this. The detective smiled politely. We're not. You are. No. He pointed toward Mercer. Your mother did. Daniel looked at me, then at the detectives, then back at the letter still sitting in my hands. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in my older brother's eyes. Real fear. Not anger, not arrogance. Fear. The detectives asked him to remain seated. Mercer continued reading Mom's written instructions. Claire, if Daniel is hearing this letter, then he ignored every chance I gave him to tell the truth. I felt tears rolling down my face. Mom knew exactly how this would unfold. She had planned every step. She wasn't protecting money. She was protecting me. The detective opened a thin evidence folder. We recovered these yesterday. Inside were photocopies of fake powers of attorney, fake bank authorization forms, and forged signatures. Each one carried Daniel's fingerprints. Each one. Daniel buried his face in his hands. Elaine wasn't there to defend him. No relatives, no audience, just facts. Cold, patient, unavoidable. Finally, Daniel whispered, I was going to pay it back. Nobody answered. I just needed time. Still, nobody answered. I wasn't trying to hurt Mom. Mercer quietly closed the folders. Intent doesn't erase fraud. The detective stood. Mr. Bennett? He produced a pair of handcuffs. Please stand. Daniel looked at me one last time. You won. I slowly folded Mom's letter. No. I shook my head. Mom did. The detectives escorted him from the room without another word. The hallway felt strangely peaceful after the door closed. Mercer poured 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to me. I've practiced estate law for 34 years. He smiled sadly. Your mother was one of the smartest women I've ever represented. I laughed through my tears. That sounds like her. He nodded. She knew her son. He looked toward the closed door. But more importantly, she knew her daughter. The probate process finished 3 months later. Mom's wishes were honored exactly as written. The house became mine. Her retirement savings funded scholarships for first-generation college students. The family cabin was donated to a veterans charity she loved. Every single instruction reflected who Hugh really was. Daniel eventually accepted a plea agreement for fraud-related charges. He wrote me 3 letters. I answered none. Some bridges don't need rebuilding. Some apologies arrive years too late. Some bridges don't need rebuilding. As for me, I stayed in the house. Not because it was valuable, because it still smelled like Mom's cinnamon bread every winter. I framed her handwritten letter and placed it beside the front door, not as a reminder of betrayal, but as proof of something far more important. Real love prepares for the future, even when the future hurts. Every scholarship recipient who walks through that house sees one sentence engraved under Mom's photograph. The truth doesn't rush, but it always arrives. Looking back, I finally understand why Mom told me not to let guilt make my decisions. For years, I confused forgiveness with permission. I thought being the bigger person meant accepting whatever family handed me. It doesn't.
Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is let the truth speak for itself. And sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't a house or money or property. It's finally knowing you were never the problem.